Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, and Kate Andrews, Economics Editor of The Spectator. And welcome to both of you. So, front pages then, let's start, shall we, with the the continuing crisis in the health service making their front page with an exclusive story, they say, that the NHS is sending patients to hotels to ease bed blocking in hospitals. After today's speech by the Prime Minister saying the NHS will be fixed, along with the country's other problems, but not saying when exactly, the Star portrays him as Baldrick in Blackadder, with the headline, "I have a cunning plan." The Express also leads on that speech and Mr Sunak's five-point plan, asking people to judge him on whether he fulfils the pledges he's made to fix the country. It's also the lead for tomorrow's Daily Mail, Rishi, judge me on my five-point plan. The Times likewise makes it their top story on how Mr Sunak plans to restore British pride. The Guardian claims an exclusive that £122 million worth of personal protective equipment ordered during the pandemic from a company linked to Tory peer Michelle Mone was unsafe and could have compromised patient safety. And finally, although it's just a little too late for Christmas, the Sun has news of a virgin birth in Peterborough. Don't forget, scan that QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme and you'll be able to see the front pages of the papers while you watch us and our guests. So let's go to Kevin Maguire from the Daily Mirror and Kate Andrews from The Spectator. Welcome to both of you. So, Rishi's big pledges, we heard them. Kate, what did you make of them and how he set them out?
Well, he did lay them out quite clearly. They mainly revolve around the economy, the NHS and immigration. And under the economy, you have some subcategories, a pledge to halve inflation, to grow the economy, and to reduce the overall debt. And I think you can look at it from two perspectives. The first is that in some ways this was not a very ambitious speech because the pledges that he's made are following the forecasts of plenty of the major people out there, Bank of England, the CBI, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which do expect inflation to fall in 2023, apart from the Bank of England, which do expect to see some growth towards the end of the year. So his pledges do seem to be following forecasts that are already made. But of course, he's gambling on a lot because some of these things are completely out of his control. The pledge to halve inflation, for example, is not within the government's control. If it were, they would have been tackling inflation a long time ago. It's very, very politically painful. But to tackle inflation, the main way to do that is mainly in the Bank of England's remit to hike interest rates. That's been happening, but at a very slow pace. Ultimately, he's relying on the hope and the fact that energy prices have been falling as we found alternative sources since Russia decided to wage its war against Ukraine. There are a lot of factors that are out of his control. So in that sense, it's bold. But if we're being truthful, he is also following the trajectory of a lot of forecasts that are already out there. Well,
I mean, that's certainly been one of the suggestions, isn't it? You know, judge me, or let's read the Express, actually, judge me on my pledges to fix Britain. But it's sort of no parameters on how to do the judging with no timeframes involved in all of this, Kevin.
No, that's absolutely right. Inflation, halve it this year. He should beat that. Hopefully, he'll beat that because, of course, it's still very high at 10.7, as Kate was saying. All the forecasts are going to fall. But growth, when will growth be restored? It's unlikely to be until 2024. Debt, well, they've given up on reducing it this Parliament and probably the early part of the next Parliament, should they be re-elected. Cut NHS waiting list, when? Probably not this year, next year. Small boats, stop small boat crossings. Well, I think that's absolutely impossible, even if you had safe and legal ways into Britain for some of those people who go in those boats. There'd be others who knew they would, or unlikely to be accepted, they would still try it. And it was rather like it was a weird speech, given that all the billing in advance was about maths up to 18, teaching maths up to 18. Then it wasn't one of his five areas he wants to be judged on. It wasn't his sixth point. He kind of says it, and then he moves on to three on the economy, the NHS, and boats. And yeah, perhaps they are the areas he should be judged on, but I think he may be judged pretty harshly And I think that lack of a timetable, when is this going to happen? I think he's left himself incredibly vulnerable now.
Yes, and the Times, Kate, saying that his speech marks the start of a 2-year battle for the centre ground with Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. Starmer making his first speech, suggestion that Sunak brought his forward to go first, if you like. But is it a battle for the centre ground? Is that what you're hearing here from what we heard from the Prime Minister?
It's too early to say, first and foremost, because the speech was vague, and second, because whilst Labour is doing very well in the polls, a lot of that is due to the fact that the Tories aren't doing so well. I think it's still very unclear what the actual Labour platform is on issues like the debt, for example. Would they follow Jeremy Hunt's new fiscal rules, or would they do something different? Would they be more comfortable with borrowing like Liz Truss was? Or did the Labour Party learn the same lesson as the Conservative Party? So I think there's still some outstanding questions as to what they're really competing for and what the centre ground looks like in the next election. But the speech did make sense to me, actually, when we think about Rishi Sunak as a politician, because something that he's always done from his time going in as Chancellor during COVID, up through the leadership race and all the rest of it, is he really does like to under-promise and over-deliver. That's been a constant when it comes to what's been expected in terms of COVID handouts, energy support, the differences between him and Liz Truss on the campaign trail when it came to tax cuts. He likes to understate and then try to over-deliver. So I wasn't terribly surprised that we didn't get some really big and bold promises about what he achieved, for example, by the end of 2023. I think the reason maths was in there is because almost regardless of everything else, it's very clear if you go back to his Mace lecture early last year, the closest that we've really gotten to a Rishi Sunak manifesto, a personal one anyway, is that he really wants education to be his legacy. Almost regardless of anything else that happens, he's trying to plant education, as Jeremy Hunt did in the autumn statement, I think, for Rishi Sunak, as he's done in this speech, as a constant, so that when we look back, we see that that was the main change that he was trying to push, while of course trying to juggle everything else. And I think that the speech was a reminder to the public that he is completely aware of what's going on. He's not tuning it out. He knows how difficult times are right now. Whether or not the public will feel satisfied with his answers to that is a completely different question. But I think that was the main point of the speech, which is I'm here and I'm focused on this every day, and please don't forget that.
Yes, I mean, the Daily Mail too, focusing on the 5-point plan. It's an easy hit in some respects, isn't it? These, sweeping ambitions, halving inflation, the like of which you've both talked about. But he did talk too, didn't he, Kevin, which is what the eye's leading on, about the problems in the health service, that they're taking emergency action, that there are challenges, 7,000 more hospital beds, new funding on social care. He also talked about strikes, suggesting there's a lot of misinformation out there. Was this a missed moment, do you think, to really go into the nuts and bolts of this, to give the government's position on both these big areas of public concern right now? And actually could have stood there and explained why nurses can't get more money and the ambulance staff can't go back to work and so on.
Yeah, look, the announcements on health were old. They've been said before. They were just dusted down, repackaged. There wasn't anything new there to tackle that crisis, which is probably why he moved on. And of course, trying to ban strikes, well, you scapegoat strikers in that way. You scapegoat workers for much deep-seated problems. Waiting lists were going up before the pandemic. They're now 7.2 million in England. The nurses and ambulance crews going on strike is partly a symptom of what's wrong in the National Health Service. It's not just about pay. It's professional workers are very demoralised about the service they are working in. They can see it isn't operating fully. The Times has on strikes how he's going to set the legislation on minimum service provisions to force workers in trade unions to provide a level of service. Doesn't say what it is. For instance, on the railways, said about 20% of trains have been running. Is he going to set it 40%, 50%? It'll be a legal challenge on that. Can you actually force people to go to work when they voted to strike, and cleared incredible legal hurdles that exist? And it seems he isn't really tackling the root cause of why people are going on strike. He just thinks, right, I'm going to try and ban it in whatever way I can. I just don't think that was a particularly clear speech. Perhaps it would have been the speech he might have been the centre of a speech he might have made at last October's Conservative conference if he hadn't been rejected by the Tory party members before he was brought back after Liz Truss crashed and burned so spectacularly and expensively over 44 days. I just don't think he has sharpened the focus of the public. I just do not feel he's going to change politics with these pledges.
Yeah, I'm jumping about a bit here and showing the Times because on the right-hand column, they've got a story that these strike laws could be enacted as soon as Thursday. Employers, the paper says, will be able to sue unions and sack staff under government plans to curb the right to strike, the Times has been told. Rishi Sunak poised to announce legislation to enforce minimum service levels in 6 sectors, including the health service, rail, education, fire and border security, and the laws which will be announced as soon as Thursday will require a proportion of union members to continue working to retain a minimum level of service, as you said. Kevin, go for it.
Yeah, and to announce them on Thursday doesn't mean they will be in force on Friday, because I imagine the legislation will have to go through the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and it'll be a pretty fierce parliamentary debate on this, particularly if he tries to rush it. Now, I think it's fundamentally unfair and unjust, anti-democratic what he is doing, but even his supporters, I think, will have to concede it's unlikely to impact on the current wave of disputes.
Yes, and they quote here Tim Sharp, Senior Employment Rights Officer at the TUC, saying the measures are unworkable, counterproductive and almost certainly in breach of the Human Rights Act of 1998. So let battle commence on that one, I think. Meanwhile, let's go back to the Eye, Kate. And this is their exclusive that 3 NHS authorities have signed deals to discharge patients to so-called care hotels. Now, if you listen to radio phone-ins, many people have said, why don't you bring back, like, Nightingale hospitals to put those who are nearly well enough to go into their own home but not quite into those places? And the message has come back, there's not enough staff to do that. So one wonders how you get staff to fill these hotels, to take some of these patients, to relieve the bed blocking issue.
Oh, there's a major question around staff whenever we're talking about upping capacity. It's one of the major issues currently in the health service. But I imagine that the government has crunched the figures. This is only speculation, and decided that it will inevitably be cheaper to use rooms that are already available and to try to staff them than it will be to try to recreate the Nightingale hospitals. Those were done very efficiently and very quickly. It was an absolutely massive undertaking. The story speaks to a major problem with the NHS, which is that social care for the better part of the decade has just not been included in that discussion. And I think when we look at some of the mistakes of previous Tory governments, it isn't that they haven't been increasing the money that goes to the health service. Every single government has in real terms, some certainly more than others, like Boris Johnson's. But it's that social care for a long time was not part of the discussion. One of the major issues we have now is up to 13,000 beds are suspected to be occupied by people who could be leaving hospital but aren't leaving hospital yet. It's difficult to discharge them. And often once they're discharged, it wouldn't necessarily be safe to send them right back home. There needs to be some kind of medium-term situation made out for them. And that's something that the government's trying to handle now. And of course, that £13 billion extra that has been pledged for social care down the line, most of that is currently going to the NHS right now. And so the money that was supposed to be there for social care is there for playing COVID catch-up at the moment, which means that, again, it is just an underappreciated area of what's causing a lot of the problems in the health service at the moment.
Yes, and the WHO warning about intense pressure from COVID, a new variant as well. Obviously, flights coming in from China too, which has, raised some concerns. And just on this one, in the Eye, this is in the southwest of England, could be expanded to other parts of the UK. Suggestion that hotel stays would be expected to average 4 weeks. And Age UK saying hotels are not appropriate for elderly care, but could be the lesser of 2 evils. So we'll see. Just one sentence, Kevin.
Yeah, it seems to be two parts of Devon and one Cornwall, and they seem to be private care hotels. So it's not just like going to a travel lodge or a Premier Inn. But there is a huge problem in the NHS of getting people out in social care, and the government can't, after 13 years, wash its hands and not take some responsibility for that. It's had time to fix it, and it hasn't.
OK. Interesting story, that one, anyway. We'll see how that goes. Both of you, stay there. Thank you very much. Lots more to come, including the front page of the Times World, or the inside pages, rather, of Times World. Their headline, Republican rebels dig heels in over the Speaker, despite Trump's appeal to them. Back with that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, and Kate Andrews, Economics Editor of The Spectator. Kevin, let's go to The Guardian, shall we? And this is continuing issues surrounding the Conservative peer Michelle Mone and the supply of PPE.
No, absolutely. There's been some fantastic reporting in The Guardian by David Connan and this, and the PPE scandal more widely, I've got to say, by Private Eye and the Sunday Times. But this is that the 122 million order for gowns that went to PPE MedPro after lobbying by the Tory peer Michelle Mone. They couldn't be used because they weren't sterile, amongst other issues. And it's why the government, the Department for Health and Social Care, is now suing to try and get the money back. And of course, we know the police are investigating, and National Crime Agency has raided homes. And there's allegations that Mone and her husband took a huge amount of money from that through trusts in the Isle of Man. And of course, wrongdoing is denied. It's got to be said in fairness. But you know, the whole, right, in COVID, there are many, many scandals to come out on the supply of PPE and VIP lanes. Some people, and in this case, Mone lobbied Michael Gove, amongst others. They seem to get very favourable treatment in big contracts, but delivering very little is the accusation.
Yes, and certainly The Guardian saying that Mone had previously denied via her lawyers that she had any involvement in the company. So that's her word on it. In the meantime, you're home for the holidays, Kate, dodging the extreme weather in the US, thankfully, but with a beady eye, no doubt, on what is happening in the House of Representatives, where this crucial role of Speaker is seemingly undecided after 6 votes. Tell us more.
There's only one story in town at the moment. The Republicans took back the House of Representatives in what was otherwise quite a disappointing midterm election for the Republicans. And what was expected to be a straightforward vote, returning the minority House Leader Kevin McCarthy, who represents California, into the majority House Leader. 20 Republicans who are considered to be on the right of the party are blocking this vote. They're voting for a congressman from Florida, Byron Donalds, and they have now gotten to the 6th ballot, and it has failed yet again. And all of America's watching. And I think it's quite interesting because Donald Trump, who these 20 right-wing Republicans, many of whom very much support him, has actually gotten involved and said, look, you know, you guys just need to get this done. Please just get Kevin through. And they're actually saying no. And I think it's very interesting to see the way that the Republican Party is splitting, the fractures that are there. They're big questions. We're already talking about the 2024 general election, the presidential election. And I think they're really big questions as to what the Republican Party stands for, who they're willing to unite behind, and also who they're willing to listen to. Because there was a time not too long ago where these right-wing Republicans would have certainly gotten on board had Donald Trump said so. And the fact that they're not now, I find very interesting as well. So a lot of different factions, a lot of political debate, a 6th ballot that has failed, and the whole nation is watching, really asking, what is the Republican Party? What is it going into the next election? And what do the different factions look like? And I think we're learning a lot about that through these failed ballots, which are a bit embarrassing for the party. Frankly, very interesting to follow. Lots of political drama to be had.
Absolutely. First time in 100 years the Speaker's not been voted in on the, or got the gavel in the first vote. And I think it was 1856. It took 133 rounds, which we haven't got time to report, for a Massachusetts representative to get it. Let's hope he doesn't last that long. We will see. Thank you both very much indeed.